Thank you very much. We start our session about innovative trade and finance. And actually, I've been here in Davos for the last 2 days, taking part in 3 sessions. And every time we talk about innovation, innovation, innovation. And this is not a surprise, because, I mean, these type of things require a lot of discussion and understanding how the world would move forward. But today we'll take a chance to discuss with our experts the ways they see the development of innovation in the area of trade and finance. And just look at the numbers. World trade in goods and services in 2017 was exceeding $40 trillion US. According to Dubai Multi-Commodity Center, the cost of trade globally is estimated to approach $2 trillion US. And 20% of that is related to paperwork. Paper document flow is a key obstacle to trade, and if you look at Myers estimates, it says that for a container of fresh cut flowers to be delivered to Rotterdam from Mombasa in Kenya, it is necessary to compile dozens of documents and exchange 200 letters with different farmers, shipping companies, suppliers, customs brokers, and government agencies. So this is incredible. But new technologies actually can ease this process significantly, and today we will discuss this approach. So we had a discussion right before the session with the speakers, and we decided that we will act in an innovative way, introducing our speakers. It will not be me who will name all the participants of the panel, but I'll ask each of participants to introduce themselves. So I'm delighted to start.
Right here?
Yeah.
And the microphone is working. Thank you. Thank you, Alexander. And before I go too far, I do want to thank the Integrated Petroleum and the Caspian Week team for really doing a tremendous job, don't you all think? So much work that has gone into putting the show together and bringing us all here together into a vibrant discussion. So my name is Gurvinder Ahluwalia. I'm the founder and CEO of a venture called Digital Twin Labs. And the idea being on how do you bring different flows together, like the physical flow, like the digital flow, like the payment flows. And that's the idea of a digital twin. It probably should be digital triplet. My prior background is from IBM, where for 10 years I did an innings with IBM and left IBM about 2 years ago as the CTO for IoT, blockchain, and cloud. I come from a long history before that in helping the industry and clients adopt, use, benefit, solution frontier technologies. And though this is a blockchain discussion, it could easily intersect with AI, it could easily intersect with IoT and cloud. And when consumption by society or businesses go after it, they don't go after it technology by technology. They want to look at it holistically. So I'm so glad to be on the panel over here and look forward to the learning from you as well as the rest of the panel.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Happy to be here, and I hope that after the break we are energized to hear a lot about innovation. I'm Robert Zaremba from Cerealia, co-founder and CTO. I'm a computer scientist, and also recently we're involved in a few research in crypto economics. My major is analytics and data mining. But for several recent years, I was contributing to many blockchain projects related either to the ICO, smart contracts, in general, fintech or crypto finance. And with Cerealia, we are trying to merge things together between my partner, who is a trader, agri-trader, and here new ways, basically, to use the technology to support the traders. I'm from Lausanne, here in Switzerland, and very happy actually to be here because the community, the IT community, the technology is really thriving here.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kairat Kilimbetov. I'm a governor of Astana International Financial Center. It's a brand new initiative of President of Kazakhstan, Nursultan Nazarbayev. Actually, why we would like to tell this story here in the Caspian Week. I think this initiative from one side is very global, from the other side is very focus on the region, which is particularly part of the agenda of Caspian Week platform. We created a new legal and regulatory platform which focus on all the recent trends which happened now, and we understand all of this geopolitical turmoil, recent changes, and recent tech race between global and regional superpowers. And I think it's also great to talk and learn from you, from all of you, what's going on from your point of view, and how we can be helpful to each other. I spent last 20 years in a different macroeconomic and financial services regulatory authorities, so it would be interesting to share some of our insights with you.
I'm Helena Teplitskaya, advisor to the chairman and CEO of Sberbank. It's actually about 5 years since I joined the bank. It's the love of my life. Prior to that, I served as president of a consulting firm called Dimnex International, president of the Siberian Energy Group, founded the American-Russian Chamber of Commerce and Industry in '92, then American Eurasian Chamber of Commerce. I also dedicated about 20 years of my life to teaching. I was a professor at Northwestern University Kellogg School of Management, teaching global initiatives and management there. So I am immensely grateful to the organizers of the Caspian Week. I'm excited to be here, and it's really an honor. So I really look forward to a wonderful panel, and indeed Alexander Ivlev is such a moderator that I'm pretty sure we have a very lively discussion.
Thank you.
So my name is Paolo Sironi. I am the Global FinTech Thought Leader of IBM, Watson Financial Services, and I'm a member of the IBM Industry Academy. What does it mean? It means that I explain digital transformation to the business leaders by linking the business model with the technology transformation. And I try to do this by bringing a lot of people around the table. I have our clients, so banks, particularly insurance companies, because I work in financial services. I have the regulators. I have the technology players. I have the entrepreneurs, so these thousands and thousands of individuals that create the fintech ecosystem. But I try to invite to the table each and every one of you, because digital is something that needs to be used by us, the people, so we need to make sure that that makes sense and generates value. So being the FinTech thought leader of IBM means that I have to think, and as I'm thinking, I'm also writing, so I'm author of literature. One of my best sellers that was published 2 years ago, that is a strategy book, is titled FinTech Innovation. As a subtitle, From the Robo-Advisor to Goal-Based Investing and Gamification. So trying to understand how we digest through technology the need of making investment decisions. And if you can stay a bit longer after this amazing panel, we have the book launch of my 4th book that was actually launched in China last week, and we have a nice book signing. And I thank Caspian Week for the opportunity they gave me to introduce you to the topic of the tier of transparency.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Some of you have seen me yesterday. My name is Shengun Lu. I'm from China, but I'm based in Geneva. Before I joined my private life, I was for long, 21 years, as a senior trade negotiator of China. Did a lot of negotiations with Caspian countries. And now I'm managing director of Letigo Geneva, which is a small, humble think tank with which we help international organizations, governments, business associations, and enterprises on policy and international trade and strategy related to global policy as well as China. And so myself, I'm half-time professor, half-time consultant for those clients. So I do sit on board of some of kind of Chinese and foreign companies, including some digital ones. But as you could see, I'm a policy guy. So probably you will find later on my intervention, my contribution to this will be least innovative. But I hope I could humbly complete the picture of the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Zaremba. I'm the CEO of ComGo. ComGo stands for Commodities Go. It's a fintech company incorporated in Geneva in August last year. With the objective of building a blockchain-based platform to digitize trade and commodity flows. So after 2 years of experiencing POCs in the blockchain industry for commodities, we finally decided to move to production, and the first letter of credit was issued on the platform the 21st of December last year. My background is banking, 18 years within Société Générale, the French bank, over the past 9 years in Geneva, developing the commodity business.
Thank you very much. So now we can see the brain power we have here in the room now to talk about innovation. I'd like to start with a question to Kairat. Kazakhstan is really the key player in the Caspian region. And we could see that over time, the country has developed pretty much good investment climate. For example, if you don't know, there is a Foreign Investors Council in Kazakhstan where President Nazarbayev every year meets with the global leadership of major international businesses. I would say that entrepreneurship in Kazakhstan is developing also quite well. And the government is really investing time and effort and money into developing healthy investment climate. We all know that in 2018, in July, Kazakhstan launched the new project, Astana International Financial Center. And the first result was actually in 2018. It is Kazatomprom did IPO, which was a successful project. So would you please tell us, it's one of the most ambitious projects in the region. Many countries try to do it, including maybe Russia, trying to create regional financial center. So how did Kazakhstan came up with such an idea? The first question is, and how will the center help to promote financial integration and trade in the whole region? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to share with you, which is I think very relevant to all the questions which was done by moderator. So actually this idea was born in 2015. Officially, but non-officially, was many thoughts about this last 10-15 years in the region, because the region not been covered previously by any cities within our former Soviet Union space. So we've been covered out of London, out of Istanbul, out of Dubai, and it was always the idea that it should be definitely a few financial centers within this space in order to really to be kind of a reliable station for financial flows in the region. So, but let me back to this, my takeaway from Davos week, which is, I think, is very much relevant to today's discussion. It's like three main dimensions, I think, three takeaway, which would be very important to respond to each, let's say, panelist today in particularly the area. But I think we now see big changes, which is in three dimensions for countries like Kazakhstan or for countries from the Caspian region is very relevant. So first of all is big changes in geopolitical room, let's say. And room for the previous policy of maneuvering became closer and smaller and smaller. So now we see that it's a huge increase in the role of the new regional powers, countries like China and India. And so yesterday was a very fascinating presentation of a book of Kishore Mahrubani about tech race between United States and China. And he actually said the famous forecast up to 2050, #1 economy in the world would be China. #2 economy in the world would be India. And United States would be #3. It's like one of the forecasts, so nobody knows what happened finally, but at least according to the current assumptions, it looks like this. It changed dramatically our previous perception how the, let's say, the future should look like, because we now more, well, let's say, last 200-300 years been more dominated in the global GDP by the, let's say, OECD countries' economies, but now it's a new commerce are coming. Like it's not only China and India, but it's also demographically move with gravity move to the Asian dimension. So this is one. #2, and it means that not just like changes in a statistic. It means this huge social, humanitarian, cultural, geopolitical, political, economic, business context, because it's a completely different DNA of these new players, let's say. Number two is for especially countries like Kazakhstan or Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan and Russia, so the super cycle for high prices for oil and any other commodities is over. So last 15 years we've been evident when it was unprecedented period when the price for oil was about $100, and it's not like this anymore. It will be ups and downs definitely, but we understand that it's now situation is changes, and for macroeconomic authorities is a huge challenge, I believe. Number three is the new trends in tech, and I'm sure my colleagues who focus on digital technologies more specifically will tell you what is going on. But what we see is now a time what reminds me of the Cold War, when it was a, let's say, battle for nuclear or space between Soviet Union and United States. Now it's between the United States and China, especially in terms of the battle between platform companies. So from one side is internet giants like Google, like Apple, like Facebook, and Amazon. From the other side is Baidu, Tencent, and Alibaba. And it's like completely different platforms which would be dominate globally, let's say. So in this term, I think we are now living in the world where each country, in order to fight for favorable investment climate, for bringing investment, should also start to think this way, like to create special ecosystem, legal, regulatory, business, economic platform in order to be attractive, first to bring global and regional investors, and second to be attractive for local players, for, let's say, people in your country, in your region, and I think this is very challenging. So that's why all of these thoughts actually give us ideas that we have to create completely new financial center, new generation. It doesn't make any sense to copy-paste what was happened 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 20 years ago, or even 5 years ago. Doesn't make any sense. It should be like very dynamic, flexible platform, which is arising together with this new digital and cultural dimension which is going on in the world. So we decided to create an international financial center. First, we understand that it will take us like another 5-10 years, but at least for the first period of time, we can easily be regional financial hub. When I mean regional, it's also three big circles. One circle is the Central Asia countries, post-Soviet Union, Central Asia, but in broader terms is also, let's say, Caucasus countries like Azerbaijan, Georgia, Armenia, but also Mongolia. Number two is the Eurasian Economic Union, is also 170 million people market, and number three is a Belt and Road Initiative. So we yesterday talked about that Belt and Road for Central Asia is a very natural, very close to our mind agenda, because it's restoring ancient Silk Road, and for us it's very much important also to be part of this global trends to connectivity, especially connectivity land bridge construction between European Union and China. I think our region can and have to benefit from this. This is from one side. From the other side, we understand that, okay, financial center is usually dominated by conventional financial industry, which is capital markets, asset management, private wealth management. But even in those industries, we see that, like in capital markets in Australia, it's now revolution in post-trade in terms of the kind of moving towards the blockchain-enabled technologies and post-trade solution. In asset management and private banking is also the same new, let's say, tools and instruments from one side. But from the other side, completely new, like a fintech, regtech, all of this stuff, let's say, like e-commerce, which is now became a global agenda, and it will be discussion on WTO level. So what we decided is that just we learn from the previous history, the most successful experience in financial services, or let's say economic development, is currently United States, which we've been built a fantastic ecosystem in Silicon Valley in the West Coast, and fantastic ecosystem for Wall Street in the East Coast. And what we see now is like converging, like both coasts are closer to each other, and it doesn't matter who will take over. What does matter is now it's like we cannot call it just financial service, or we cannot call it just digital technologies. It's merging process. And I think that to bring this like a fin from one side and tech from the other side is even much more than just fintech. It's much more, it's a new universe, but how to build it and how to, let's say, compete with the race between United States, China, India, European Union also, very fascinating in terms of the human capital. I think the most important is investment to human capital. So investment to people locally, investment to the, let's say, people in the region, to be attractive platform. So in these terms, it's very much important to build this cluster, which is let's say, which is very attractive for especially the generations like millennials to work, to, let's say, to protect their intellectual property, to create a sandbox in regulatory authority, to allow them to let's say, to take a risk. But this risk should be measured and it should be like covered by the regulatory sandbox. So these are few ideas which been platform and ideology for this foundation. We create new dispute resolution authorities. By the way, I know that in the Caspian Week would be discussion about we need common arbitration center. We already created based on common law jurisdiction in Astana, and you can easily use us from one side. From the other side, we have a regional stock exchange, which we built together with NASDAQ, Goldman Sachs International from one side, and from the other side with Shanghai Stock Exchange and with the Silk Road Fund. So we are now in the process to build our joint venture in terms of the fourth industrial revolution with a number of institutions. We are close to common understanding with our Israeli colleague to create Academy on Cybersecurity. So that's going to be the regional cluster where the smart people like you, all of you, should come and make a business. So this is our actually key statement this afternoon, and I would love to respond to your any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the panel agreed that if someone has got a question when the speaker finishes, we will not wait till the end. You can address a very short question to the speaker if there is something unclear or you want to get more information. So feel free after the speaker finishes to raise your hand if you want to ask the question. So if there's no questions for Kairat, I would like to address question to Paolo. So technologies gave rise to big data, which is actually increased in availability of information and higher transparency. So it's a matter of a couple of hours to get any type of information these days. So we go to internet or use different resources, but it's very easy. So how does the transparency affect global trade and financial sector? And again, do we really need a new transparency theory to gain better insights into ongoing changes?
Okay, so, you know, the concept of transparency in essence means that you want to know what happens to you and to your data. The moment you post your pictures on Facebook, you have them on Instagram. This is my Instagram, so you can link me in so that I know that you put me up there. But it also refers to a new way of understanding how global trade works. Let's think about the environmental impact, or if you like, your preference for biofood. The moment you decide that you want to make sure that your consumption has the lowest impact on the environment. You go to the supermarket and you buy a bio product, and you have to trust that that product has been effectively created, generated, and built using the most of the bio techniques which are available. But basically, you know that you may pay €2 more than the equivalent product, and you have an act of trust. Now, blockchain would enable you to track every step of the process, in principle, that have generated a product, so that automatically you will know that you can trust that that product is bio, because they've been transparently checked by authorities that make sure that this is effectively so. So it facilitates the reduction of asymmetry of information by which the consumer always have to trust up to a point the provider, and then needs to make an act of faith. Why is that important? That is important because only transparency can create what I would call a consequentialist ethic that changes the way we work as a society, as a group of people, as communities. I attended the presentation of Ray Leonard yesterday, very interesting about the impact of global warming. And now basically what he said that somehow is already too late because a lot of things have already happened. And I think that there are a lot of people that 10 years ago thought that this was a problem. There were a lot of people 10 years ago that didn't care about it. There were a lot of people 10 years ago that didn't know what to do about it. There were a lot of people 10 years ago that forgot they had to do something about it. Now, it is important that we therefore embed the transparency in our life so that we remind ourselves the consequences of our action. I give you an example. I met a startup very recently, truly innovative, mind-blown into me, which takes care of transparency at the level of the trash, what you basically produce every day when you consume at home. Now, you throw away the stuff, right, when you prepare your food, the plastic, the biological element, the metals, and then somebody comes and collects them, and you have to trust that they basically go to the right department that then recycles them and brings them back to the environment in the best of the cases. But that's an act of trust, and I know that a lot of people don't trust that the municipality then will perform that way. But now I invite you to think about something else. Do you know how the trash industry works? Basically, the person that comes early in the morning, making the noise that wakes you up, collecting your trash, is paid by your municipality because you pay taxes. So therefore, through your taxes, he's paid to come and collect it. What does this person do with this trash? Well, sells this trash to somebody that needs it to create energy, for example, biofuel. So basically, that person receives twice payments from you and basically from the people that he sells it to. Now, think about that. Should there be transparency and a blockchain mechanism that I saw this interesting startup created, linked to IoT, that enables you to weight your trash package so that you know how much is worth your plastic, how much is worth your bio, how much is worth your metal. And therefore, you follow through the process to make sure that people that collect it effectively respect the mission that they were given. What can happen? It can happen that you can now ask to be paid to collect the trash because there is value inside. So only with transparency, we bring to the surface value in everyday life that is completely forgotten on things which are super important, like the environmental impact.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
Go and check your trash, okay? With your wife. It's
Can I ask a question?
So, yeah, sure.
How about, for example, like, okay, it's only recently, yes, when we started thinking to create a credit for, you know, like sustainability or all these things.
Okay, yes.
How about, like, why we, in your opinion, yes, why we didn't came up with solutions? Because we don't need, in fact, blockchain. We could trade or sell these things before.
Well, put it this way. I know that ESG is very important. A lot of CEOs of banks I'm also talking to addressed the audience at the World Economic Forum about environment, social responsibility, governance. And a lot of investors are now embedding that concept inside of their strategies. But how do they really know that the company they invest to abides to those principles? Now, in the past, that maybe was not necessary because banks could make money more easily. Now it's more complicated. There is more transparency. They need to do that. But we need to make further steps. What does prevent us to make those further steps? Well, I work for IBM, and we take care of technology. And we know that a lot of companies are a bit in trouble because they need to change their technology without dropping from the tree, right? Because you need to grab the new branch before you leave the tree. And that's complicated and very expensive. But the fact here is that there is something which is more concerning the legacy systems to transform an industry, which is legacy leadership. That means the incentives. So we need to create the right incentives to make sure that all parties are starting to realize that it is in their interest to perform a new type of economic action. That is where transparency plays its game, because it's a huge force that might enable you to realign incentives between the world of the citizens, the world of the consumers, the world of the bankers, the world of the owners of the industries, and also the governments. In Europe, maybe we can have a few words after this presentation, but this is the perfect, the the perfect storm in terms of the regulatory impact in Europe, 2018, 2019, because the European Commission wanted to hit the European market with transparency rules related to the GDPR, what happens to your data, the PSD2, the availability of your data to other providers, the PRIPS, the risk inside the financial products, and the MiFID II, the client protection. So transparency is embedded in regulation and is the engine that enables to transform a society. But then it needs to be helped by technology, because by itself it does not fly. That is the relevance of fintech, of blockchain, artificial intelligence, if we see it for the good and not for the bad.
Thank you very much. Robert, I have a question for you. Your company plans really to change traditional methods of trade and settlements with agricultural commodities, and your system which is used by your company is based on blockchain and financial technologies which are making transactions safe and secure and efficient, right? Would you tell more about it? How does it work? And what are the advantages of so-called smart contracts on your platform? Thank you.
Sometimes when I'm trying to explain, what is the innovation here, I'm getting into the position that I hesitate, in fact, to use the word new technology or a blockchain. Why? Because I believe that we could reach the change without, let's say, profound change of the technology. Sometimes the technology, in my opinion, technology is here to help us. And in our case, or in case of most of the startups, by using the technology, let's say new technology, it's just easier. Instead of shaping the, I don't know, thousands of people established in a business and frameworks, and this is how it works, in a big corporations. So in case of Cerealia, so what we are doing, we are trying to tackle several problems, and I would like, maybe if somebody will have a question later on, or please break me, I would like to maybe not directly touch the blockchain. I would like to touch the problem and how. So the problems, what we have here is in fact with the financial and the execution process of agricultural trade performed by the small and medium companies. Very often is based on a paper flow and on a document. The execution and the negotiation process is very slow, cumbersome. It has lots of traps, which then the traders can use to get some argument and fight for a default. And this costs, of course, money. The market is not that liquid, especially when people will try to get advantage of it. So that's one. The other one is from the financial perspective. Behind this, after the Second World War, the world reached the point that we could get the international trade and an exchange, and we need to somehow denominate it, and the world decided to use US dollar. I think it was in 70s. France was trying to change that. They made some offense, and fortunately, maybe not, it didn't work. And now again we are facing these problems. So international trade is denominated in the US dollar. This is what we need to face. On the other hand, there are sanctions which are making a troubles for emerging market. Why, for example, if Russia wants to sell a goods to North Africa, they need to eat, for example, they have the money, they could do some exchange. Why US should control it? Of course, we have the problems with the geopolitics, and I think what Keirat, you've been talking here about the opportunity of growing a new financial centers, new economical centers. Yes, that could bring a lot of balance to have this free trade and having the world more liquid in case of the economy is more stable in this case. So we are trying to get the advantage that we have the social move now that, in fact, we want to release, break these barriers and get into the point where the traders can, in fact, trade with their respective national currencies. So we are doing with the fintech partners, with who we are establishing the partner collaboration. And finally, Okay, so I was mentioning also about the execution flow, yeah? So the papers are not needed, especially that at the end of the day, this paper is going to be accounted into the computer, in the system. Yes, so we have the databases now which are processing them. Probably some companies, they are still holding the papers, but by principle, yes, the method, especially the big companies, yes, it's impossible to manage it with the normal documents. So it's already there, yeah. So why we just can't leverage it and make it more efficient? And finally, is this trade finance. Again, we don't need okay. Somehow in the world we have that most of the money is collected by nobilties and the banks. But financial, the size of the financial world is calculated to be around $17 trillion US, whereas the whole assets value of the world is more than $600 trillion US, which means that we have a lot of value. We can collateralize, we can trade, we can use as a security. So there are many ways how we can basically get the money and provide the security for our trade. So this is what we want to leverage instead of like going through maybe cumbersome processes to get the money to cover and for the trade. And having, like especially in emerging markets, why they need to pay 17–20%. Of course, sometimes it's related to the currency value fluctuations, but we can do better. Yes, at least few percent, and especially for them, this will make difference. Recently, we got a discussion with another startup helping directly farmers to help them growing the business in Mexico to increase the harvesting. The problem they have is that the credit, the lending is so expensive for them that they have a struggle to connect one end with the other end. And so they can't basically break this barrier. Yeah? So we can provide them tools where they can do a leapfrog and basically expand a little bit with their production. So this is the company they are doing, Cerealia is doing, and something we could leverage and help them also to sell. So that's about the idea of the financial technology here.
I have one more question. So what do you think about the prospects of settlement in cryptocurrencies and local currencies in agricultural trade? And we know that dollar is the prevailing currency now in agricultural trade. Anyway, it's possible to challenge the US dollar in this area with the new currencies and...
We are probably not today. Depends on the market. Yes, for example, in Europe we don't do US dollar. Yes, and like if there is some international trade from France to Germany, they already have a euro. Yeah, it doesn't go from US dollar. With UK, I'm not here a trader, but I can bet that they also don't use US dollar. For emerging markets, again, depends. There are a lot of geopolitics. We know that it's not that ourselves who makes the decision. It's that there is a government, they have their establishment. So it's coming. I really believe that with the revolution, yes, we are thriving with more transparency here, that we will force these regulators that we can do an international trade without the US dollar.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, if you don't mind, just it's probably a simple question, but it's good to know from the person who is every second involved to the blockchain development. It's a classical case that how internet compete with intranet, and those time nobody expects that intranet will lose so fast, let's say. So today people are telling that okay, private blockchain is great, private blockchain is great, public blockchain we should think about it. It's a lot of regulatory phobias and government phobias around, or even corporate phobias around this. So my question is it obvious that it's also go this dimension? And in these terms, do you think that in these terms this world needs any kind of a common protocol, and who will win in any kind of universal protocol?
Very good question, yes. I almost thought that I will avoid blockchain discussion. Okay, so for the record, I'm a very big, strong believer of the permissionless system. What does it mean is that I don't need to request somebody, yes, to participate in the system, to execution. It doesn't mean that I'm allowed, for example, to access someone else's program within the system. It's like with the internet, yes? So I can, let's say, reach more or less any website, unless there is a firewall, but it's still the same network, yes? Unless there is some authentication required. And there are ways to protect it, yes? So let's say if we design an open system like an internet, we can potentially have these applications being able to interact with each other easily. So now imagine that instead of having one internet, yes, we have many intranets. So how would you communicate? Let's say, okay, I have one, let's say, banking system, or I don't know, one Facebook, let's say, in one intranet, and then I have my mobile, and I want to send an email through a Gmail, which is another intranet. So from the infrastructure perspective, that will be super complicated, because I will need to know through how to route my requests, how to maybe, okay, in fact, having one net provides this background and foundation to design universal protocols. And I don't think there will be one protocol, there will be many protocols, but at least it's much easier to establish this. If you have, let's say, hundreds of different subsystems, okay, we can do this, but we don't have the same foundation. That being said, there are use cases, yes, where a permission-based system makes sense. In the same way as in one company, for example, we can have a chat, or like a very internal chat, or a document storage, which you can't access from outside. Yeah, so...
Gurvinder, you wanted to add something on this point, yeah?
Thank you for stating that. I'm speaking a little bit out of turn. I'll give the floor back to you in just a moment. Just to throw a little bit color on the private versus public blockchain discussion. I don't want to regress into that topic. I want to come back to the main subject. The main thing I want to leave the discussion with is the following. It's less important to have a discussion around private and public. At the end of the day, the distinction is going to get diminished, and the distinction right now is one of privacy. The more interesting discussion to have is how are we innovating on the vector of privacy. And if you take the precedence of previous and parallel frontier technologies like cloud, there was the argument made by large enterprises around private cloud, and then there was lead that was taken by public clouds without naming specific providers. And where the market is now, 5 years, 6 years later, that gap has basically been closed. So the more innovation around privacy, trust is the broader subject. You've got to break it down into privacy, into identity, into governance. And as the industry journeys on the spectrum of providing privacy techniques like zero-knowledge proofs and Merkle proofs, then you begin to close the privacy gap, and you can do as private things on public networks, on public blockchains, as you can today on private blockchains. So I'll just leave it over there. It's a much greater discussion, but I will use the moment for an administrative time announcement, which we agreed on, and that is in a 4:45, I'll have to jump out.
No, that's why I suggest...
Because on this subject of private and public, I'm giving a talk at the Global Blockchain Business Council.
So that's why I'd like to invite you to make comments now
Can
about...
I make one digression here? Because I really like your example. With the clouds example, in fact, it's a perfect use case how we see how the evolution is working. 10 years ago or 20 years ago, yes, almost every big corporation or company had only the private cloud. Yeah. Like recently, even 2 weeks ago, we saw that the Walmart is now signing a contract with a Microsoft Azure cloud, so joining the open cloud.
So there's a question coming up. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Dmitry Kalinin, Integral Petroleum. Actually, I would like to ask Sulima Badi probably to provide some also alternative view of innovative trade finance and trading applications.
Maybe
and your experience. No, because I just want to compare, and it's interesting. Like, are you?
I think it's okay.
Agree with this that kind of with what was
That's fine. As a moderator, I lost my power. I realized that. Now you do my job. That's fine. Let's compare.
Well, moderation is distributed.
Yeah, it's gone. My moderation is gone.
democracy.
So, yeah, fine. Okay.
Thank you, Dmitry. Okay, let me maybe explain where we come from. I think the approach is a bit different. So basically, we did a first proof of concept with Mercuria and ING when I was at Société Générale. We digitized the first transaction, an energy cargo, with compelling results. We did a second POC with Louis Dreyfus Commodities. We had 6 parties to the transaction, including a governmental agency who posted directly the data on the blockchain. So what we're trying to achieve here is to have every party to the transaction post directly its data on the chain and have it reused every time you need it in the course of the transaction. This is where you will gain maximum efficiency. Why did we choose blockchain here? Obviously, our business is very much distributed. You have plenty of users all around the world. We are very strong believers of this open network, of this decentralized network. The other key added value of blockchain in our case is privacy. As a company, we don't store any data. We don't see anything that's happening on the chain. So what we provide is a network where encrypted documents or data move from one user to the other. So for example, we had the first transaction on our network the 21st of December, and we learned that happened because there was a LinkedIn post from Société Générale who said we opened the first LC on Comgo. So basically for us, it's privacy by design, and it's very important to bring this added value to the industry. We don't want to make a business of data, for example. We think it's not appropriate to the privacy needs of this industry. The additional elements is security. Obviously, today documents can be stored, can be stolen, can be forged. So a huge additional security. You cannot double finance documents that are stamped on the blockchain by definition. And as all of the people mentioned here, additional efficiency. So basically, to make this happen, we need to build a network. So we worked on creating this company and building a network of shareholders. So we have 10 banks backing us today, which represent 90% of the trade and finance commodity banking industry. So it brings a lot of liquidity to the platform. And 5 corporates, because we believe that building an industry solution needs to be done by the industry. So this is where we stand today, basically.
Thank you very much. So, Gurvinder, one of the famous projects your company have done, it was De Beers, I think. It's application of blockchain technology to diamond trade and supply side and sell side. And could you tell us more about how new technologies and blockchain will change global trade? And maybe which global industries, from your viewpoint, will be affected mostly?
So let me...
and tell us about flowers, by the way, because the example which I gave in the beginning was the case which Gurvinder developed a long time ago working for IBM at those times, right?
Right. So there are several wavelengths over there. Let me just first set the overall perspective of my thoughts, and then we can get into some specific cases to which I was instrumental, not necessarily owning them. First of all, let me recap the title of our session. Innovative Trade and Finance. So let me speak to each of those, peel it apart for a moment. When I think of innovation in trade and finance, I think at least on 3 milestones, 3 markers of progression. One is automation, the other is optimization, and the third is true innovation, reimagining. What we are seeing in most of the work that is being done, and this is not a good or bad statement, this is a statement of maturity of all of us, because we have a set of capabilities under our tool, we have a set of experiments in the field, and we have this many more challenges, which each experiment then learns and reveals to us. So most of the work that has been done in any of the supply chains or trade activities, and you can take the diamond example from multiple initiatives, you can take the food example, you can take the flower examples, you can take the transoceanic shipping example. And yes, thank you for recognizing my humility. I've touched most of those in my previous IBM role as well as in my current Digital Twin Labs venture. Most of that work is happening at worst in automation, but at best in optimization. I would say, to be fair, it's happening in optimization. It takes 16 documents, just like you were describing. Let's take them, let's automate them. Automation has probably been done, but there's been a dichotomy on the source of truth. Blockchain jumps in, solves that, right? But at the bottom of it, we still have digitization of a paper trail, and now we have more trust in that paper trail. What we did not do, we did automation, we did optimization. What we did not do true innovation. True innovation to me is when you put aside the current state and you reimagine the future of the industry. And the future of the trading industry, if we were to look at it, is I no longer want to tell the shipment or the box or the crate where to go. The article should tell me where it's going to go. So we are getting into the possibilities at the intersection of IoT and AI and blockchain. So it's not just a blockchain discussion, which I introduced in my introduction. And when you come at the combination of these, that's when you are really reimagining the scenarios and not looking at it as supply chain the way we looked at it for the last 3 decades, but you look at it as the box no longer I have to tell it, but it's going to tell me which is the most efficient next step it needs to take. And then I will probably have the override and the kill switch, whether that should proceed or not. All right. Another aspect I will touch, which also challenges which also presents one of the challenges that is there today, and that is the discussion is about trade, which understandably the scope is limited in the supply chain, but what about the demand side? So when Chipotle chicken gets contaminated, it takes 7 months to recall it. It is interesting to elevate our capabilities in the lookup of provenance of a food item like pork, like the examples that have been cited by IBM and Walmart, in pork and fruit, pork in China, fruit in South America, and increasingly baby food, all of which has sensitivities that are important to society. It is interesting to have an advantage now where it used to take, I don't know, 5-7 days or maybe 2 weeks to find out the provenance of a particular article, where it came from, which farm exactly, indisputably. But it's more attractive to me as a consumer and to all of us as consumers on how quickly, if I bought something off the shelf, does it get recalled, and it doesn't take 6-7 months for Chipotle to find out that where all its chicken went. Same thing with cantaloupe, same thing with many other fruits and vegetables and items, okay? So the point that I'm making is that we've made great progress and there's good maturity, but the challenge is if you look at any of the blockchain experiments that have been deployed for supply chain and trade, and you ask the question, have these been integrated to the point of sale? Now we're having an interesting discussion because the point of sale is where the supply chain intersects with the demand chain. And if any of you have been around point of sale systems, they are very brittle, they're critical revenue generators, and nobody wants to touch them. And the data schemas and things don't match when you try to do this integration. But that's where the equally important societal use case lies, not just in efficiencies in the back end. The other few points that I will make is, if you look at trade, I'm moving on to the second term. If you look at the trade aspect, there is, for every one B2C transaction, 9 B2B transactions are generated behind that. So if you think that Amazon and Alibaba or whichever your favorite e-retailer is like the market power of transactions, it's not. Because every trade platform behind it in the B2B space, for example, TradeShift, not the same brand name I think that is over here, but an Asia-Pac platform for transportation and logistics, carries 500 billion of trade. Let me put that in perspective. $500 billion of trade is about the volume that Amazon does, right? So the point being that each entity in the B2B side does massive trade. Let me speak to the finance aspect real briefly, and then I'll pause for questions, and then you can tell me if I should continue or not. the importance of finance aspects is getting a line of sight and visibility in order to mitigate risk and underwriting of risk to keep the bloodline of finance, trade finance, flowing into the system. Everybody understands that. If that does not happen, you have marketplace fractures, and stuff stops happening. Things stop flowing. So India has had banking meltdowns of banks that have issued lines of credit to the diamond industry because of double counting. So if you look at the problems and then try to translate, these are the kind of things that blockchain technology delivers, where there is uniqueness of transactions and one invoice cannot be presented to one purchase order cannot be presented to one bank and say, here, I got a PO, give me so much loan, and then it goes to another bank, and with the same PO, you're now double counting. So we all know that is one of the remedies that blockchain provides. So that being one. The other challenge being that the movement and the custody, the movement of goods in the supply chain, and we've got two kinds of supply chains at least, and that is manufacturing supply chains and finished goods supply chains. And every supply chain is very different, very little similarities. So when you're moving from one item, from one station or one entity to the other, the lawyers will describe what I'm describing in terms of chain of custody, and from a technologist standpoint, I would describe that from the perspective of integration, data integration. So you have to have trust, and also the real-time nature of what in technology, for the technologists in the room, is called state, right? Blockchain is a state machine, so at any one time, I know where it is. What translation does that have to do with the finance part? So at any one time, the bankers and the insurance companies have line of sight and visibility to where is what in custody of whom, and accordingly they can release whatever payments or insurance aspects can apply from there. So these to me are a little bit of decomposition of what we have, framed for us, the kind of the title of the session. So I'll pause over here to take questions, and I'm glad to continue for another 10 minutes before I give it to the smarter people in the panel.
Thank you. Thank you. Questions? Yeah, please.
I can have a question. I really like the example you said about the supply chains and the settlement. So you mentioned, first of all, that, okay, there is, by average, 9 B2B transactions to make before we reach B2C. Yeah, but, okay, I just want to make the digression that the volume of this B2B transaction is by far much bigger than the single B2C transaction. And when we have the settlements then, because that grows exponentially, yes, if you agree on that, it's a huge problem to reach a settlement on every single step of the supply chain. Do you think, like, having this innovation, what we are discussing, I mean, what would be, in your opinion, a time window where we start solving it in a visible manner?
All right, so this is perhaps going to be my most important point that I want to leave with the audience. The way I look at the future, and hopefully there are other advocates that look at it the same way, is I look at the future where we can eliminate complete stages of life cycle and user experience. Meaning, we eliminate complete settlement stages. So we no longer have a discussion that settlement is even needed, because in blockchain, everything is instantaneous, it's authoritative, and it's in fairly real time. So the notion of settlement kind of goes away. So let me bring this a little bit to perspective from a transaction cost standpoint. If you bring down the transaction costs of doing, we started talking about transactions. If you bring down the transaction costs to do automation, you bring down the transaction costs to do computation, which has already come down significantly. AI will bring down the transaction cost to do prediction. You bring down the transaction cost to monitor and analyze behavior, which is big data and increasingly AI. So when you have a collective of transaction costs from these various menial tasks that need to be done, and they're adopted pervasively, you have an opportunity to reimagine and eliminate complete stages of the life cycle rather than trying to optimize a settlement process. But to answer your question more respectfully, let me borrow the capital markets trading as opposed to supply chain trading. And one of the first use cases by the work done by the Tokyo Stock Exchanges, the group over there, shared with us, the industry, the findings that post-trade settlement is a $40 billion inefficiency.
Yearly. Yearly, worldwide.
$40 billion inefficiency after the trade is done to settle the trade on who owes who to whom, and then get the chain of custody and all the transactions sealed, right? So there are massive, and they're way on their way, I'm sure, in their adoption of blockchain to remove those kind of settlements. So settlements in a physical supply chain have similar efficiency advantages.
How about the time? The question was also about the time, mostly.
In terms of settlement?
No, like adoption of like when we will see where.
I don't make predictions very well. I'm a technologist. I don't have very good prediction etiquette, so I don't know when it'll happen. So if that's what you're asking.
Yes.
But it's irreversible, you think? Yeah? What happened? I mean, the exclusion of settlement.
It's already happening. It's already happening, in fact.
No, your question was.
Yes.
It's happened when? Yeah?
My question was.
The question is, it will be for long period of time, or will take it very fast time?
Well, very fast time in the optimization approach. That is the goal. But the earlier argument I was making is that there'll come a stage with high adoption of AI and blockchain and other capabilities where you're not going to need settlement stage at all.
Thank you very much. So I have a question to Suleyman. Now trade enters in a new era where all the traders, bankers, producers need to use game-changing digital solutions, and your company is producing such solutions. Can you please tell us more about your products and what you offer to your clients? And another question I would add to this one is, which markets are going to with your products? Is Caspian region part of your strategy?
Of course it is. First markets we're tackling are energy markets because they are the simplest ones to address. And when you create, when you innovate, you have to find friendly places to do so. But obviously we are very close to all kinds of commodity due to our past experience in the business. In terms of products, so LC obviously is a very important one in our industry. So it's the first one we have developed, and we're going to build on it to make it more generic and adapted to other products. Second product that is going to be available in the following days is the exchange of documents to perform KYC tasks, to perform negotiations of LC, whatever you name it. So you will be able, as a user, to connect to the platform and to send to whoever you want on the platform a hash, an encrypted hash of your document. So for example, if you have 10 banks, instead of sending all your KYC documents, the 50 KYC documents you need to send every year to your 10 banks, you just push one button and you can ship them directly to all your banks at the same time. So it's an encrypted, stamped exchange of documents. And obviously then it's the whole range of trade and commodity finance instruments that are going to be realized on the platform for receivable discounting, stock financing, and you name it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we both have to leave.
I know.
But you're in good hands.
Yeah, I made it in time, so. Let's move further in geography and let's talk about Asia. If we look at what will happen in Asian markets in 10, 15 years, we would see that there will be 2.5 billion representatives of middle class, which will mean that the structure of demand and structure of supply would completely change, and the global economy would go through big transformation where all the markets will be supplying products and goods to China and Asia. One Belt, One Road initiative, that's the initiative which China has launched a while ago, and it is moving in this direction very quickly. And Caspian region actually is one of the areas and regions which has got strategic importance for this initiative, being part of the Silk Road. So my question to Professor Lu, how do you see innovation can better help China to integrate into the region and find new ways to, how to say, enhance and stimulate the One Belt, One Road initiative? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandro, for the guiding question. If I could simply link China Belt and Road Initiative with the theme of our panel.
Innovation.
To put it simply, it's like that is an innovative initiative by China, which has two most important focus on trade and finance. So if you look carefully at the contents of this Belt and Road Initiative, which we call it a five-pronged approach, so 5 key pillars. And so it's about policy coordination, infrastructure connectivity, trade facilitation, financial integration, and people-to-people communication. So among the 5, you see 2 as key pillars related to trade and finance. So that explains how important that the BI could be for the region, and of course beyond the region. The first thing I think that on trade is that the China has decided to do is kind of to lay down a kind of policy framework, a kind of stage for the players like enterprises or individuals to perform their trade or their exchange of things. So what China has done is that very much push forward the free trade flows between China and the Belt and Road countries. If you look at carefully that China up to now has signed 16 free trade agreements and covering around about 24 countries. 16. And among these 24 countries, which covered by these 16 FTAs, 12 of them are from Belt and Road Initiative, including a recent one by Georgia. And of course, China also has recently launched together with Eurasian countries about a feasibility, about economic agreement, cooperation agreement between China and Eurasian countries, which potentially could lead to a big free trade agreement between China and Eurasian countries. I hope that could happen. Another thing very innovative and also a little bit digital, which I think would be important to mention. There are too many to mention, but I will just focus on a few. It's about digital. Also at a policy level, China has also kind of doing a lot to collaborate with Belt and Road countries to try to enhance digital or what we call e-commerce trade. Up to now, China has signed 14 MOUs for the cooperation on e-commerce, and also actually quite some of them are from Caspian region. So Russia and Kazakhstan. Of course, you know that China has in recent years pushed by the existing Premier Li Keqiang to develop this so-called Internet Plus economy. So trying to equip the traditional trade, economic sectors, different players with a kind of digital arm and to help them do better. And of course, you know, China is leading on cross-border e-commerce and also on some digital technologies. I mean, one example I could use is that in the past, when every time I travel from Geneva to China, I need to take a big envelope with a lot of renminbi just to pay for my hotels, my food, tax, everything. Now, I don't need a 0 penny. I just need my mobile phone connected with the internet and with my credit card, and then go everywhere with that. And zero money zero cash I have to use. You could even pay a street beggar. The street beggar even developed their own barcode. So you could just scan it and you pay him $2 as a kind of a generosity thing. So I think those are kind of things, I mean, both on trade and also on digital trade that China could share probably with One Belt and One Road countries, including Caspian areas. The second thing about financing, because our friends, previous speakers have talked about the importance of financing as the bloodline to help build the muscles of the trade and then the whole body of the economy. That's also a very important part of the Belt and Road Initiative. The first thing China has done is that to sign cooperation agreements with Belt and Road Initiative, Belt and Road countries on this kind of, they call it currency swap thing. I'm not expert on it, but basically is, as we have discussed, to reduce the over-dependence on dollar for the settlement of their trade. So China has signed, I think, up to now 22 such agreements, and the total amount for this swap amounts to 1 trillion RMB there. And of course, China has also encouraged Chinese banks to go set up their branches along Belt and Road countries. Up to now, about 10 Chinese banks have established in 26 Belt and Road Initiative countries 66 branches. Vice versa, 55 Belt and Road, there are 55 Belt and Road, the banks from Belt and Road countries, 21 Belt and Road countries, have also established 67 branches in China. So a lot of things are happening there, trying to smooth the financing flood as a blood for the trade. Of course, I'm not an expert on that, but a lot of banks, Chinese banks, have developed also some innovative system to help to do quicker, easier settlement system for the trade between China Belt and Road Initiative. Industrial Bank of China, they have called this kind of one-button system. It's like a simple button system, and you settle the whole process of settlement for one trade, one contract or whatever. So those are the things I think that will help a lot on that. So what we're seeing that those things are happening and helping the China's trade with Belt and Road countries. 5 years, the initiative was launched 5 years ago. Looked back at the 5 years, what we have seen is that China's trade between these countries have increased by 1.1%, when actually the global trade and China's trade with others are going down. And then so investment, China has invested over $70 billion in these Belt and Road countries, a lot. I think that's important. But to conclude, I think those are good figures, but not enough. If we look at it carefully, Belt and Road countries 66, including China 67, account for 44% of global population, but only 16% of global GDP, 22% of global trade. So we are far from doing anything good. We need to do more. And another point to say is that listening to some other panels and the previous some other speakers about Belt and Road Initiative, I think there's a little bit of exaggeration and a little bit missed statement about Belt and Road Initiative as a kind of something to resolve all. And the people forgetting about when WTO is going into a crisis and people say that, well, this is the way, and forget about WTO. No, I don't think so. And that's not the intention of China, nor the intention of Belt and Road countries. 2 years ago in Beijing at this summit for Belt and Road Initiative collaboration summit, there are over 88 countries and international organization co-signed a so-called BRI Trade Collaboration Initiative. And in that, many bullet points here. One bullet point is very important to say that we should support the global multilateral trading system and the WTO to develop better rules for all these things. And I think that's really something we need to be very mindful. So to conclude, putting Belt and Road Initiative together to enhance bilateral cooperation and collectively to push forward the movement of the multilateral trading system. And that's going to help China and the Belt and Road countries to do better on trade and finance for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay, thank you. So I have a question to Helen Teplitskaya. Brand Finance magazine published this week a new report on the world 500 most valuable brands, and Sberbank was recognized as the strongest banking brand in the world. And the score was 93.1 out of 100, which is a really great result. And my sincere congratulations with this achievement to you and to the team of Sberbank. That's really great. And don't you think that this is kind of a recognition of a strong investment of Sberbank in new technology and innovation? And which role do you think technology and innovation play overall in the strategy of your bank? Can you please tell us? Thanks.
Sure. Can I please have my presentation?
Yes.
First of all, I would like to thank our stoic audience for your dedication, for your patience and staying throughout the panel. It's been a very long day, and I promise I will wake you up because I can tell that some of you really need a little boost. So I will allow myself to start from a comparison that actually originally appeared on the internet in conjunction to big data, when it was compared to adolescent sex, when actually everyone talks about it, nobody knows what it is about, and everyone thinks that everybody else is engaged in it. I would extrapolate this to innovations, to big data, and all of the things that are happening in the industry. But I can assure you that we as Sberbank give it a very long thought, and I already mentioned today at the cybersecurity panel in conjunction to the question that our strategy is posted on the internet at Sberbank.com. But now I have to run through a disclaimer. I showed it to you. I'm not selling our securities here. But I will give you a very brief snapshot about the bank so you understand where we are coming from. We have about 151 million clients worldwide. 90 million of those are active. Retail clients in Russia. We have 2.4 million corporate clients. I will skip the rest of the statistics. We have around 300,000 employees. It will not be as impressive for my Chinese peers, but I think for Russia, we are quite a special case. And not to say that we are 177 years old. So how do we, being 177 years old, turned ourselves from Sberkassa to the IT company with the banking license? We already talked today about the really exponential growth of data. But it's not a joke when one of the questions earlier pertained to saving energy because of the electricity needed to process all the data. I can illustrate this with a very simple example, that if you take a swimming pool, half of it will be filled in 42 minutes. But when it drops fill exponentially, the second half will be filled in 6 minutes. And this is the volume of data that actually we have to deal with. And when it pertains to technology, not just surviving, but thriving in this kind of environment, I think requires special efforts. So how did we transform? First of all, I will use one word. We turned ourselves into an ecosystem. And when it's my third panel, so please bear with me. Some of you who attended earlier, I might be a little less energetic. But I can tell you that when I talked about ecosystems, I talked about cybersecurity, I talked about e-health. This is not a joke for us because we come from a vision that our services have to really be holistic, that we have to be with the client for life, and that we have to address all the needs our clients might have way beyond traditional banking service. And for this, indeed, we need to become as digital as we can. So we use a lot of instruments, including artificial intelligence, VR, AR, Internet of Things, you name it. And this is how our ecosystem looks today. As you see, we have lots of sub-ecosystems that constitute one living organism, what is Sberbank today, which is cloud services, cybersecurity, dog, B2C e-commerce, unified communications. We have House Click, which is one of our newest products, when we help the sellers and buyers sell the real estate solely via the internet. And we have a mortgage service that is based, the first credit factory ever created in Russia is based on artificial intelligence. That's why we can provide such speedy service to our clients and provide, being actually like a one-stop shop. One of the latest products that I think is, revealing of how we really are going digital is Yandex Money. It is our joint venture with Yandex. It is the most recognizable e-wallet in Russia. Yandex Checkout is the most popular payment aggregator in Russia. And Yandex Money, being service for individuals, is a e-wallet, bank cards, money transfers, and payments for services. Yandex Checkout, the service for businesses. So it is really growing exponentially. And if you could take a look at our partners in business, you will see that we're really open to the world. We don't close our borders being a financial institution. We really reach out to the world. We are partnering in different capacities in various aspects with the likes of Amazon, Microsoft, Oracle, but there are much smaller companies. I will not mention everyone here, but the bottom line is that we really count on collaboration. I mentioned today, for example, talking about cybersecurity, that we will never be able to survive the threats today, but I think thriving on opportunities, working together, not being afraid, but welcoming challenges is what Sberbank is about. And I'm tremendously proud to be a part of our team. Our values are, I'm a leader, we are a team, and everything for the client. And you know what? It is not a joke. It's my actually soon to be 5 years at the bank. I never worked for a large financial institution. I always liked being in control of what I'm doing. And it's for the first time in my life, I really enjoy being part of the team. And it's about everlasting learning. It's about embracing technologies. If somebody could ever tell me that I will be presenting on cybersecurity or e-health or the likes, years ago, I would never believe it, because most of my classmates, my girlfriends are already retired and just babysitting grandkids. I love my granddaughters, but there is so much more I want to learn, so much more I want to share. So again, thanks a lot to the organizers of the Caspian Week. It's been really an honor, and it was a tremendous pleasure, because most of all, because of the friendships. I met so many wonderful people. Each of you could easily be on this panel and probably deliver a much more exciting presentation. So I'm sorry if I disappointed you, and again, thanks a lot for staying and being as stoic as you are.
Yeah. Thank you. And by the way, you had a proper consultant on cybersecurity matters, by the way. It's EY did the project for you. So anyway, I think we had a very good discussion. So let's open up a platform for questions. Couple of please introduce yourself.
I think it doesn't work.
Okay, Ray Leonard, Anglo-Eurasia from Houston, Texas. I have comments for two of the speakers, Kairat and Paulo. I was very interested when Kairat started and mentioned 3 of the great changes until 2050 that he saw in the world, that he didn't mention a 4th, which was climate change, which I think is possibly a larger change than the other 3. I mean, for example, climate change is going to devastate India. Temperatures at the edge of the human threshold, changing of the monsoon. China will be devastated by sea rise with some of its coastal cities. On the other hand, Russia, not so bad. It's going to extend the growing season in its southern borders. In its northern borders, the melting of the ice is going to give the world a new highway for transportation of goods from the Far East to Europe, which is 50% shorter than what you have now, and it's going to open up some of the most prospective gas basins in the world for new reserves. So it's really going to change everything. And one of the things I wonder about a little bit is in terms of the reality-based questions, such as Paulo has talked about, is that climate change is such a big change, and people are so focused on getting the right things in their scenario planning on second and third and fourth order questions that I wonder how good they are at looking at the first order question in terms of looking at their different scenarios. And I'm wondering if Paulo would comment on whether he sees that as something that's being handled correctly.
Well, I'm not sure if it is handled correctly, but there is now a change in the way a lot of fields of science are working, which are trying to move out of Cartesian determinism, getting into holism. That means it was fairly easy in the past to focus on one problem, trying to optimize the problem, but all of a sudden the problem is connected to another problem. Our world is very connected, is very complex. What happens in China affects the US, what happens in the US affects India, so on and so forth. So now, the best thing that we can do to go back to that first order is to have an holistic approach. And this is the reason why in the next presentation, when we presented this new book, The Theory of Transparency, we talk about the achievement of holistic behavioral awareness, so making sure that transparently we understand the consequences of our actions beyond our communities, looking at what happens in our next door's garden. And that's the only way to make sure that that works. But without proper transparency, we will not trust each other. We will not care about what happens in China when we're in the US and vice versa. So that is the first and foremost thing that we need to gain back to make sure that the holistic perspective can break through in society.
Thank you. Kairat, please.
I also would like to agree with you. I think the climate change, even I mentioned number 1, number 2, number 3, climate change is number 1. Yeah, that's everyone understand. It's clear for everyone. And I think, so we all should focus on this, so on a global, regional, and local level. Definitely, it will be a common problem for everybody. And I also would like just, if you remind the presentation of this Sberbank, you see that in this circle, they have a response to any type of trends or problems, so they have a certain solution in the ecosystem. So we are in our ecosystem in Astana International Financial Center. Also, like I mentioned yesterday, that we are post-use of the Expo focusing on sustainability. So our response and our contribution to this would be development of the affordable and accessible financial tools to develop the green technologies in our region. So it means like a green finance and many other institutions.
Thank you. More questions? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Yulia from JP Morgan. I have a question to Helena. What do you think about a role of big banks in innovative finance? What is the contribution or how they can participate?
Of which banks, I'm sorry?
Big banks, generally, overall.
The role of big banks of innovative finance? Well, I take a liberty to think that we are among those who are leading the trend. At least we work our tail off, actually, moving in this direction. We will only survive if we not just catch up, but if we ride the wave and skyrocket with the wave. And I think, without bragging, that with Sberbank, at least among our peers, are doing not so bad in this direction. We are open to the world. We're in 22 countries, and including Kazakhstan, where we really enjoy the latest developments. I was in the Global Expo, and that's where we met, and I was absolutely astounded, and I was so proud that Sberbank, even in Kazakhstan, made a contribution. But what I was talking about there is how to, I didn't address it today, but I think it's the cornerstone or how do we develop people to actually be adequate to these new challenges? And I would like to stress, hopefully with my own example, that age does not matter. That we can have, very young students being outdated, and we have seasoned people. Let's label us not old, but seasoned, who are really educating themselves and sharing the knowledge. And I think that Sberbank, to a great extent, is a missionary in enlightening professionals and children and young generation, so that they will have a chance to not just find whatever job, but really be happy with what they do, being passionate about what they do, and really kind of be an open book, because not just our corporate university that was recognized as one of the leading in the world, even though it's as young as it is, but we are investing in the schools, for kindergarten children, and now our Harashkola, the good school, is open to the rest of the educational society in Russia, because we believe that only by investing in youth, only by investing in helping elderly, our veterans, for me and for our team, it's not a joke, and in health, because demographics of Russia is challenged, and only with the support of health for everyone, no matter where, in which remote corner of Russia people live, Sberbank is always by your side, and this is what we live by.
Yeah. Kairat would like to add something.
If I may, I also would like to support Helen and add a little bit. So, if I understood correctly, your question is, so what is going on now is, so definitely the financial landscape is going to be changed. So we all understand that all this tech progress is irreversible. So, but there are two scenarios for big names in Wall Street, let's say, or in China, or in our part of the world. Is like one, to participate on this. What is Sberbank doing? I mean, not to participate even, not to lead the process, to create the mission statement of Sberbank, to create an ecosystem. It's not, they don't like to call them anymore bank anymore. So they're bigger than banks, not only financial services, but we've seen in the presentation, and non-financial services. So, and it's not only Sberbank, it's like ING is doing it. It's a many.
JP Morgan is a great benchmark for us, of course. So we understand where our roles are. Sorry for interruption, but I think JP Morgan representative for, I think, complementing what we do at Sberbank. We appreciate it.
With some big names embrace technologies officially, maybe some big names telling that we don't care about whatever the fintech, let's say, size is that small, so we can easily scale it. We will buy out them, let's say. So it's two scenarios. Both are very realistic. So who will win in this race? It doesn't matter who will take over, because the financial landscape for usual people changes. So we don't see it. It's, for us, it will be again our communication with our gadget, let's say, but who will do it for us? So definitely the banks, we need banks in terms of, there is no replacement for banks in terms of the risk management. So someone who should take over about risk management. So there is no response to this. It can be technology, but anyway, some kind of what we call banks, let's say, last 200 years. In political economy terms, the banks lead world like the last 200 years. I'm not sure. I'm sure that they will fight for this leadership from one side, but from the other side, we see the new players, which is internet giants, which is doing much more bigger job than banks today, and they are also very powerful. So we will see, I think, in the next decade what happened. But anyway, I think it's a dramatic changes, but let's say, banks, it's institutions which is needs in this ecosystem as well.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Like with respect to the role of the big banks and the big institutions, I mean, it's great to see that there is some initiative to support the sustainability. In your case, do you have any data to share, for example, how much do you contribute, or based on your revenue, what's the ratio of
We're a publicly
investments?
traded company. Our financial reports are on the internet. So I think if you explore, you will find the answers, browsing through our reports.
Part of sustainability.
So let's do last question for today, and please introduce yourself.
Andrew Migalishin, Joyce, it's payment service provider for cryptocurrencies. And I have a question for all speakers, if it's possible. And I want to return to the about protocols for money transfer that using by financial institutes. Today is, four most popular: Hyperledger, Ripple, Corda, and Quantum, I think. What do you think? What protocol will be winner?
I have a conflict of interest. IBM.
Okay. Maybe win something another protocol, for example, IBM. Please.
Well, put it this way. Ultimately, the issue is always interoperability, because the world is always much more complex and varied than what we think. So I don't think that per se there is one protocol that needs to win against another one. The key question is, how do we make sure that we can create an hybrid architecture that enables different systems to talk the one to the other and to communicate and to transfer information and decision-making transparently to the various users. And this is actually the reason why IBM has always been into the hybrid cloud type of thinking, if you like. So we don't think that we will ever lock in anything into one container only. You need to make sure that these containers can be the one next to the other and communicate the one with the other. That's really the future anyway.
I will not endorse any of them. I believe in openness and security. So the one that will provide greater versatility, agility for the development, while providing security for the data, being open for everyone. This is the one. It's my personal opinion. I do not express opinion of the bank, going on record with this. However, this is what I personally think.
Karat.
Yeah, so let me put it a little bit another way. So what we discussed previously, in terms of, we've all been evident last year here was a huge discussion around cryptocurrencies, and we remember the price for cryptocurrencies those time it was booming, and it was, everyone was enthusiastic. What we've seen last year is like traditional conventional industry, banking industry, doesn't allow, let's say, cryptocurrency became a significant part of infrastructure. Let's put it this way. It's legal, it's endorsed, but not really kind of, it's not a game changer yet. From one side. And usually like people from traditional conventional industry, they're telling cryptocurrency, I'm not sure, but blockchain in some like a government program, probably yes, it's a great technology. So in these terms, whatever, I think that what we've seen now in blockchain and cryptocurrencies, so everyone realized that it's like first edition or first generation of this technology, and maybe this technology been created for something else, which is, I strongly believe that for cryptocurrency doesn't need access to the fiat space, fiat currency space, because it's been created for, let's say, the process of tokenization being created for completely different stuff. Let's say, what is the further development of entertainment, like iGaming, etc. So this is really cannot be part of the traditional value chain of the financial landscape. It's would be the segment for the future value chain for financial and non-financial services. So in these terms, it's very difficult to predict which protocol will lead. But if you see that in the previous questions we discussed, so what is the conventional industry doing? All protocols which you mentioned mostly is a consortium of the banking industry. Like they are controlling the situation.
No.
Yeah, mostly. Yeah.
No.
No. I mean, some of them directly control the situation, like participate in the industry. Some of them left already this consortium, but they continue to control what is going on. And I'm sure that this is something which is people in the traditional industry watching very carefully. Yeah.
May I slightly respectfully disagree after? Yeah.
The question was about the blockchain, and I would like to firstly highlight that blockchain is not necessarily about the cryptocurrencies. It's a technology which we can use to many other things than the cryptocurrency. when somebody is asking me this question, I usually say that we don't use the same hammer to fixing wash machine and then putting the nail in the wood. Yeah, so first of all, there will be many. And secondly, in fact, this is a good question, but because probably in a business, everyone is thinking about which technology to use, which one will sustain. Yes, so we will not need to change. I hope that all the blockchains, which has a good support already, there is a business like behind them, like Ethereum. Yes, banks are using already Ethereum in their private environment. Big projects are using already Ethereum. Ripple in the same way. Yeah, so I believe that most of them, which already have industrial application in a wider scale, they will stay. As for the leadership, there will be many leaders. And I think that if you think, there will also be a new projects coming in. Yeah, so it's not that we already solved the problem. Of course, each of this technology will evolve. We'll have a new version, like with Ethereum 2.0 next year, probably, hopefully. So yes, look at what is already adapted, would match your mentality and the business. And I would like to make one more point here. Since this is a panel about the innovation, and somehow it was also driven by the technology, on one side, so we've been talking about the security and the privacy. So on one side, I'm very happy that these words are coming here because it's a good thing. On the other side, on the other hand, since probably among you there are some directors or executives, if you didn't consider cybersecurity or privacy, then something is wrong, because you expose your business to collapse. In Europe, yes, if you don't respect the privacy, then they can shut you down. So it should be a standard, a default. If somebody is saying about the privacy, it's not that something new or innovation. It has to be a standard, and it has to be really considered with a right respect in every company.
Thank you very much. So I suggest we are running out of time that we stop questions from the audience. I think we had a pretty decent discussion today, and I'd like to thank all the participants of the panel for a great conversation, and I suggest we give applause to the group. So, thank you very much, and we'll keep working together on the agenda of innovation and technologies. Thank you. Have a good day. Thanks.